at the finals of the World Cup, and now we are into the rapid play. Pragg opens the game with 1 e4 and Magnus responds with e5. Knight comes out to f3 and Magnus, will he go knight c6? Yes, he does. He plays his knight out to c6 and Pragg plays his favorite Italian with bishop to c4. Knight comes out to f6 and now d3, a very solid system bolstering the center. Magnus develops his bishop out on a good square and Pragg plays this slightly lesser known line with pawn up to a4. He wants to gain queenside space and Magnus plays pawn to d6. Pragg castles it out, and now will Magnus castle as well? Well, he plays his pawn up to a5 and tells Pragg, you're not getting all the space there on the queen side. Pragg offers the trade of the bishop. Bishop takes, pawn takes. Now white has doubled pawns, but the f file is open. Magnus castles and Pragg quickly brings his knight to d2. Look at Pragg's time. He's already up to 26 minutes almost. Magnus down to 22 minutes. He plays his knight to e7. He wants to play c6, d5 or reroute his knight to g6, and Pragg goes knight h4. The knight is in an attacking position, but Magnus brings his pawn up to c6. What does Pragg do next? Queen e1. The plan is to bring the queen to g3 and keep pressure on the king side. Magnus pushes his pawn to d5. Now, if you take here, then black would have a very strong center, so Pragg goes back. And now taking here is not a good idea because there's a lot of pressure on f7. That's the reason why Magnus plays his queen up to d6, but now queen g3, pinning the pawn here, putting pressure here. There are threats of playing d4 in the air, so Magnus quickly attacks the queen and asks it to move from that square. Now the queen is attacked. The queen can actually go to g5, and it does. It attacks the knight. Now Magnus can either move back his knight or push his pawn forward. He does that. Now knight f3 is a great move because you keep the pressure in the center and later break with d4. Will Pragg find it? No, he plays his knight forward. It looks very aggressive because it attacks the queen and also the pawn is pinned here. However, it's not a good move. The advantage for Pragg has been lost. E takes f5, and he felt that he still has some attacking chances here because of the pawn coming up to f6, but king g7 is such a classy move. It stops f6 because now there are 3 controls here. Pragg brings his king to h1, and now another beautiful move, queen f6. You can't avoid the trade of queens because after knight f5, e4, there's this knight e3 fork. Magnus has seen this and Pragg has to trade the queens, and after knight takes f6, black is out of the woods. The position is now still around equal, maybe very slightly better for Magnus, but Pragg's advantage is nowhere to be seen. e4 played. Now pawn pushes forward. Magnus can play rook a d8, keeping the center strong. No, he takes. Now taking here is not a great option. The reason is that after pawn takes, he's given up the c4 square for the knight, and now the knight can put pressure on the a5 pawn, as we'll see later in the game. Rook a d8 hits the knight here on d2. Pragg can just move his rook up, and he does. It defends the knight and plans to double the rook on the f file. This is still a very complex endgame. You can say middle game, queenless middle game position. Rook to d4, putting pressure on the e4 pawn. Pragg brings his rook here so that if the knight moves, f7 falls. Knight goes back to g8, and now he pushes the rook back slowly and steadily. Pragg is gaining control over the position. Rook goes back to d7, and now Pragg defends the e4 pawn so that his knight can actually start to move now. He plays rook e7, and knight c4 would be very, very powerful because it attacks the a5 pawn. First, Pragg wants to defend his e4 pawn, so he goes bishop c2, and Magnus brings his knight to d7. His idea is also to place his knight on this active square. Well, but Pragg's knight goes there first. Magnus's rook goes to defend the pawn. And now Pragg goes g4. Not at all a good move because it weakens everything. Knight gf6 is the best move here. But Magnus plays f6. And that is not so great because now Pragg goes rook g2. His idea is to play g5 and create weaknesses in the position. Knight goes to h6, and now g5 would be very good. Suddenly Pragg is once again pressing here with the white pieces. He pushes. This is such an important game because the one who would win this would get a huge amount of advantage in this World Cup finals. Rook g3 is a good move here, but he goes rook g2. Maybe not the best place for the rook, but these are very subtle points which are very difficult to consider. Rook e6 played, and now after rook d2 attacking the knight, Magnus finds a brilliant move, rook f6, because now if you take the knight, the rook is hanging, and if you take the rook, the knight will take it. With this, what he has managed to do is reduce Pragg's pressure to some extent and exchange one pair of rooks. The queenside pawns get traded, and now Magnus goes king f8. He's starting to feel that his knights have a lot of potential, especially the f4 square is weak. Pragg brings his king up to g2. Magnus brings his king to the center. He very clearly understands where his pieces belong. Pawn to a5. Pragg is trying to put pressure on these pawns, and he has that more space on the queen side, but Magnus shifts his attention to the king side. The rook is actively placed. Pragg goes passive. His rook was on an open file. He now plays a passive move. Magnus goes on the attack. He's threatening a fork here with knight f4 check. And time-wise, Pragg has only 14 seconds. Magnus has 2 minutes 36 seconds. The king goes back to g1. The knight moves in. Black is suddenly taking over the initiative. Pragg has to be careful. Rook comes out to h3. Now bishop d1. Very important move to keep control over the position. But he blunders with a6. Pragg had very little time on the clock. And after takes here, Pragg's idea is bishop a4, knight a5, try to attack the c6 pawn. That's exactly what he does. But what he has missed is that after rook c3 attacking the knight, knight a5, this knight is already in a great position. The other knight joins in, and with these three pieces, the white king is toasted. You can see that Pragg is a bit surprised. He's actually shocked that his position is so bad now. Knight h3 check, and this is all over. King cannot go back here on h1 because of the same reason that he goes to f1, rook a3, attacking the bishop. If the bishop moves, rook a1 is checkmate, and so he takes with the knight with a check. King goes up, the bishop is hanging, a check. Look at how the knight controls all the squares. Pragg resigns. Magnus Carlsen wins the all-important clash.